Jeffrey Dahmer walks among us. He is unremarkable at first glance, tall, bespectacled, soft-spoken. His demeanor is almost timid, his voice measured, his presence forgettable. But behind his dull exterior lurks something terrifying. He is a predator, one of the most depraved killers in modern history. He does not hunt in the shadows or strike from the dark. He moves in plain sight, blending effortlessly with those around him. For years, no one suspects a thing. He is polite, reserved, even charming when the moment demands it. When he speaks, there is no malice, no rage. His words are simple, his tone almost apologetic. But beneath the surface, a storm rages, an unrelenting hunger for control, for power, for possession. A hunger that leads him to do things so grotesque, so beyond human comprehension, that even the most hardened investigators will struggle to process what they uncover. Jeffrey Dahmer does not kill in the heat of the moment. He does not lash out in anger. Every decision is deliberate. Every move is calculated. He lures his victims with promises of money, photographs, companionship, whatever it takes to get them inside his apartment. And once the door closes, they belong to him. But the story of Jeffrey Dahmer does not begin with bloodshed. It begins with isolation. It begins with a boy who grows up feeling different, a boy who learns to hide his thoughts, his urges, his desires. Born in 1960, he is a quiet child, intelligent but withdrawn. His father is a chemist, his mother struggles with mental health issues. Their home is filled with tension, with arguments, with instability. Dahmer retreats into himself, searching for something he cannot name, something he cannot understand. By the time he reaches adolescence, his thoughts take a dark turn. He is fascinated by death. He collects roadkill, dissects animals, studies their insides with a morbid curiosity. He wonders what it would be like to control something, to own it, to keep it forever. His urges grow stronger, but he tells no one. He knows they would not understand. He begins drinking heavily as a teenager. Alcohol becomes his escape, his crutch. He shows little interest in school, in friends, in the future. He is drifting, lost in a world that feels dull, meaningless. And then, one night in 1978, something shifts. The fantasies he has kept locked away for so long demand to be satisfied. He picks up a hitchhiker, Steven Hicks, 18 years old. They drink, they talk, and for a moment, it seems innocent. But when Hicks tries to leave, Dahmer panics. He cannot let him go. He cannot bear the thought of being alone again. He grabs a dumbbell, swings it hard. Blood spills. Bone cracks. The fantasies become real. This is his first kill. The first of many. He dismembers the body, buries the remains, and moves on with his life. And for a while, it seems as though he might stop. He joins the army, attempts to fit in, tries to suppress the darkness inside him. But it does not go away. It waits. It festers. And when he returns to civilian life, it returns with him. For years, he holds it back. He fights his urges, drinks to numb them, drifts through jobs, through failed attempts at normalcy. But in 1987, he gives in again. This time, there is no hesitation. No panic. He knows what he wants. He checks into a hotel with a man named Steven Twomey. When he wakes up, Twomey is dead. Dahmer does not remember killing him. But he does not stop. He stuffs the body into a suitcase, brings it home, and disposes of it piece by piece. The monster inside him is awake now. And it is hungry. Over the next 4 years, he refines his methods. He learns how to lure, how to manipulate, how to kill without drawing attention. He targets young men, mostly from marginalized communities. Men who will not be missed. He picks them up at bars, at bus stops, on the street. He offers them drinks, promises them money for photographs, assures them they will be safe. And they believe him. They follow him home, step inside his apartment, and walk willingly into their own graves. Once inside, they never leave. He drugs them, strangles them, and then the real horror begins. He does not just kill. He keeps. He experiments. He tries to create living, breathing puppets, injecting acid into their brains, hoping to strip them of their will, to turn them into something that belongs to him completely. When that fails, he dismembers them. But he cannot bring himself to throw everything away. Some parts he keeps. Some parts he eats. The stench of decay becomes overwhelming. Neighbors complain about the smell, about the strange noises coming from his apartment at all hours of the night. The police visit more than once. But Dahmer is calm. He is polite. He laughs it off. Just some bad meat, he says. And they believe him. They walk away. The man they ignore, the man they dismiss, is one of the most brutal serial killers the world has ever known. And the worst is yet to come. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer is born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. From the outside, his early life seems ordinary, even stable. His father, Lionel, is a chemist, a man of science and discipline. His mother, Joyce, is high-strung, anxious, prone to mood swings and outbursts. Their home is not a happy one. Arguments erupt frequently. Tension lingers in the air. Joyce's mental health deteriorates, and she spends much of her time locked away in her own world, consumed by anxiety and depression. Lionel, consumed by work, is often absent. And so Jeffrey Dahmer is left alone. As a child, he is quiet, withdrawn. He does not cry often, does not seek attention. He watches, listens, absorbs. He is different from other children, though no one realizes it yet. In the beginning, there are no signs of violence, no obvious warning signals. But something is forming beneath the surface, something dark, something unnatural. By the time he reaches grade school, his behavior starts to shift. He struggles to connect with his peers, often preferring isolation over interaction. Teachers describe him as shy, but intelligent. He is not disruptive, not aggressive, just distant. He seems lost in his own thoughts, disconnected from the world around him. Then a fascination begins to take hold. A fascination with death. It starts small. He collects insects, jars them, watches them struggle. But soon, insects are not enough. He moves on to larger creatures, roadkill, small animals. He finds dead birds, rodents, even a dog. He dissects them, studies their insides, wonders how they fit together. His father, Lionel, believes this interest is purely scientific, a reflection of his own background in chemistry. He encourages it, teaches Jeffrey how to preserve bones, how to clean the remains properly. He does not see what is growing in his son's mind. But Jeffrey sees it, and he does not tell anyone. At home, the tension between his parents escalates. Their fights become louder, more volatile. His mother's mental instability worsens, and his father pulls away. The marriage crumbles. No one is watching Jeffrey. No one is paying attention. And so he drinks. He is 14 when he first turns to alcohol. He sneaks beers from the fridge, steals liquor when no one is looking. By the time he reaches high school, drinking is a daily habit. It dulls the loneliness, quiets the thoughts in his head. He fantasizes about control, about owning someone, keeping them forever. He imagines bodies, motionless, silent, obedient. He does not want them to leave. He does not want them to resist. He does not understand these thoughts, but he knows they are wrong. And so he hides them. At school, he is an outcast, but he learns to perform. He develops a sense of humor, an ability to make people laugh with outlandish, bizarre behavior. He mocks his teachers, fakes seizures, pretends to have disabilities to entertain his classmates. They find him amusing, even endearing. But no one sees the real Jeffrey Dahmer. No one sees what is festering beneath the surface. Then, in 1978, his world collapses. His parents divorce. His mother takes his younger brother and leaves, abandoning Jeffrey in the family home. He is 18 years old, alone, isolated, with nothing but his thoughts. And for the first time, those thoughts become action. A hitchhiker named Steven Hicks walks by the house. Jeffrey watches him. He looks strong, young, alive. He wants to keep him. He invites Hicks inside, offers him a drink, talks to him, keeps him there as long as he can. But when Hicks tries to leave, panic sets in. The thought of being alone again is unbearable. He cannot let him go. He picks up a dumbbell. He swings. And in that moment, Jeffrey Dahmer is no longer just a disturbed young man. He is a killer. It is June 18, 1978. Jeffrey Dahmer is alone in his family's house in Bath, Ohio. His father has moved out. His mother has taken his younger brother and left for good. He has no friends, no obligations, no one checking in on him. At 18 years old, he is completely and utterly alone. That's when he sees him, Steven Hicks. Hicks is 18, just like Dahmer. He has shaggy brown hair, an athletic build, the kind of youthful energy that Dahmer has always been drawn to. Hicks is hitchhiking, looking for a ride to a concert. It is an ordinary summer day, nothing out of the ordinary, until Dahmer slows his car and offers him a lift. Hicks gets in. Dahmer is careful. He is friendly, relaxed, casual. He tells Hicks that he has beer back at his house, that they can hang out for a bit before he drops him off. Hicks agrees. There is no reason to suspect anything. Dahmer doesn't look dangerous. He doesn't act threatening. He is just a guy offering a drink. They sit in the house, drinking, talking. The conversation is easy, unforced. But Dahmer is stalling. He knows that sooner or later, Hicks will want to leave. And that thought, The idea of being alone again, of losing control, fills him with panic. When Hicks finally stands up, says he has to go, something inside Dahmer snaps. He cannot let him leave. He grabs a dumbbell, a solid metal weight used for exercise. He swings it, hard, crashing it against the back of Hicks' skull. Hicks staggers, stunned. Dahmer swings again. This time, the force is enough to bring him down. But he is still alive. He is groaning, dazed, trying to move. Dahmer acts quickly. He straddles him, wraps his hands around Hicks' throat, and squeezes. He presses down with everything he has, until the body beneath him stops struggling, until the chest stops rising, until he is still. Steven Hicks is dead. For a moment, Dahmer just sits there, looking at the body. The act is over. The fantasy is now real. And reality is messy. He does not feel the rush he expected. He does not feel triumphant. He feels panic, terror. The weight of what he has done is suffocating. He has to get rid of the body. He strips Hicks naked, then drags the corpse down into the basement. There, he examines it, looks at the face, the body, the hands that once fought back. The silence is absolute. For hours, he does nothing, just sits with the body, trying to figure out what to do next. Eventually, he acts. He grabs a knife and begins cutting. He severs the limbs, works methodically, taking his time. There is no rush. No one is coming home. He is alone, completely free to do whatever he wants. Piece by piece, he dismembers Steven Hicks. But even that is not enough. Disposal is a problem. He cannot bury the body whole, someone might find it. So he takes the remains to the backyard, digs a shallow grave, and buries them. It seems like a solution. For now. But paranoia creeps in. Days pass, then weeks, and the thought lingers in his mind. What if someone finds him? So one night, he unearths the remains. He takes the bones, carries them to the garage, and one by one, smashes them with a sledgehammer. He grinds them down to dust, reducing Steven Hicks to nothing but fragments. Then he scatters them in the woods behind his house. No body, no evidence, no witnesses. And just like that, Jeffrey Dahmer gets away with his first murder. For years, he tells himself it was a one-time thing. A mistake. A moment of madness. He will never do it again. And for a while, he doesn't. But the darkness inside him does not disappear. It waits, it festers, and when it returns, it will be worse. Much worse. Steven Hicks is gone. His body is dismembered, his remains dissolved in acid and scattered in the woods behind Dahmer's home. There is no evidence left, no blood, no body, no trace of the horror that took place. And for nearly a decade, there are no more murders. But Jeffrey Dahmer does not change. He does not forget. He does not regret. The fantasies do not disappear, they grow stronger. More vivid. More demanding. He drinks heavily, drowning himself in alcohol to suppress his urges. He tries to move forward, to blend in. But something inside him has awakened, and it will not go back to sleep. After killing Steven Hicks, Dahmer briefly attends Ohio State University. He fails. His drinking spirals out of control. His father, frustrated and desperate, sends him to the U.S. Army in 1979. It is meant to instill discipline, to give him structure, to fix whatever is wrong. It does not. Stationed in Germany, Dahmer continues to drink. He is erratic, unstable. Fellow soldiers later recall disturbing encounters, his drunkenness, his aggression, his odd behavior. In 1981, after just 2 years of service, the military discharges him for alcohol abuse. He is sent back to Ohio to his father, to the house where it all began. But he does not stay long. His father, unable to deal with him, sends him to live with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin. She is the only person in his life who shows him warmth, who treats him with kindness. For a while, things seem normal. He attends church with her. He helps around the house. He gets a job as a mixer at a chocolate factory in Milwaukee. But the fantasies remain. He begins stealing male mannequins, taking them to his room, lying beside them, pretending they are real. He visits bathhouses, drugging men into unconsciousness so they cannot leave, so they stay with him just a little longer. When he is banned from the bathhouses for his behavior, he moves to seedy hotel rooms, continuing his experiments. And then, in 1987, the dam breaks. Dahmer meets Stephen Twomey at a bar. They check into a hotel together. Dahmer drinks until he blacks out. When he wakes up, Twomey is dead. His chest is crushed, his face bruised. Dahmer has no memory of the attack. But he does not panic. Instead, he buys a suitcase. He stuffs Twomey's lifeless body inside, wheels it out of the hotel lobby, and takes it to his grandmother's house. Over the next several days, he dismembers the body in the basement. He keeps no souvenirs, no trophies. He disposes of everything. And just like that, the killing begins again. This time, there is no stopping. The death of Stephen Twomey marks a turning point. The first time Dahmer killed, it was impulsive, driven by fear of abandonment. This time, there is no panic, no hesitation, just action, just disposal. He does not even remember doing it, and that realization excites him. The urges he has spent years suppressing now control him. The brief moments of restraint, of pretending to be normal, are gone. He has crossed a line, and there is no coming back. The need to kill, to possess, to keep his victims forever, becomes his obsession. It does not take long before he kills again. Still living with his grandmother in West Alice, he begins bringing men home under false pretenses. Some he meets at bars, others he picks up on the street. He offers them money, alcohol, photographs, whatever it takes to get them inside. Once there, he drugs them, strangles them, and disposes of their bodies in the same methodical way. But soon, even killing is not enough. Dahmer does not want to dispose of his victims. He wants to keep them. He keeps their skulls, their bones, their remains. He experiments with preserving them, bleaching them, making them last. He begins to photograph his victims, both before and after death. He stages their bodies, arranges them in poses, captures them in ways that make them feel permanent. His grandmother starts noticing strange things. The smell in the house becomes unbearable. She finds a man in the basement one night and demands that Dahmer stop bringing strangers home. She does not know what he is doing, but she knows something is wrong. In 1988, she forces him to move out. For the first time, Dahmer is truly on his own. He moves into a small one-bedroom apartment in Milwaukee. His first night there, he is arrested for drugging and sexually assaulting a 13-year-old boy. He is sentenced to 1 year in a work-release program, allowed to work during the day but forced to return to a jail cell at night. It is a slap on the wrist. By 1990, he is free again, and the killing begins in earnest. Over the next 2 years, Jeffrey Dahmer perfects his routine. He lures men into his new home at the Oxford Apartments, drugs them, strangles them, and then experiments. He does not just kill. He keeps their bodies for as long as he can. He preserves skulls, collects organs, even begins consuming flesh. His apartment becomes a chamber of horrors, filled with rotting remains, dismembered limbs, human skulls stacked like trophies. The smell is overwhelming. Neighbors complain. Police are called. But every time, Dahmer remains calm. He lies. He charms. He convinces them that everything is fine. And so they walk away, leaving him free to kill again. By 1990, Jeffrey Dahmer has fully embraced his darkest desires. His apartment at Oxford Apartments, Unit 213, in Milwaukee is no longer just a living space. It is a slaughterhouse, a morgue, a twisted laboratory. At first glance, the apartment is unremarkable. The beige walls, the outdated furniture, the quiet stillness. It looks like any other small bachelor pad. But step inside, and the truth is unbearable. The smell is the first thing anyone notices. A rancid, nauseating stench, something between rotting meat and industrial chemicals. It clings to the air, seeps into the carpet, coats the walls. Inside his refrigerator, beneath neatly stacked takeout containers, are human remains. A severed head wrapped in plastic. Inside his freezer, another head frozen solid. His closet holds boxes of bones, bleach-treated skulls, and jars filled with organs. His dresser contains Polaroids, dozens of them, photographs of his victims in various stages of dismemberment, twisted into lifeless poses. And yet, no one stops him. Neighbors complain about the odor. They tell the apartment manager, they call the police. But Dahmer always has an excuse. Bad meat, he says. My tropical fish died. He laughs it off, flashes his soft-spoken smile. He does not look like a monster. And so the complaints are dismissed. And the killing continues. Between 1990 and 1991, Dahmer kills at least 12 more men. Each victim follows the same pattern, lured in with promises of money or companionship, drugged into unconsciousness, strangled, and then experimented on. But his methods are evolving. Killing alone is not enough. He wants his victims to stay. He begins drilling holes into their skulls while they are still alive, injecting acid or boiling water into their brains. He hopes to create living zombies, obedient, thoughtless, forever his. But the experiments fail. Each victim dies in agony, their bodies twitching before falling silent. Still, Dahmer does not stop. He dismembers them, cleans the bones, stores the parts he finds most fascinating. He begins eating their flesh, starting with the biceps, the thighs, the hearts. He convinces himself it is an act of love, a way to keep them with him forever. His apartment is no longer just a crime scene. It is a temple to death. The walls are lined with his trophies, skulls, bones, preserved organs. A blue 57-gallon drum sits in the corner, filled with acid and dissolving human remains. He takes Polaroids of everything, the bodies, the bones, the process. He studies them like a scientist, like an artist. And still no one stops him. Until one night, in July 1991, a man fights back. And everything unravels. It is July 22, 1991, the night Jeffrey Dahmer's reign of terror comes to an end. He has killed 17 men. He has perfected his routine. He believes he is untouchable. But this time, he makes a mistake. At around 11:30 p.m., Dahmer is walking the streets of Milwaukee when he spots Tracy Edwards, a 32-year-old man looking for a good time. Dahmer approaches him, his voice calm, inviting. He promises money. A few drinks. Just some photographs, nothing more. It has worked before, so many times before. Edwards hesitates. But Dahmer is charming. Soft-spoken. Non-threatening. He follows him to apartment 213. Inside, the stench is overwhelming. A mixture of decay, chemicals, something foul lingering in the air. Edwards notices something else, barrels, a bloodstained mattress, a power drill. But before he can process it, Dahmer snaps a handcuff onto his wrist. Something is wrong. Dahmer pulls out a knife. His voice changes. Cold. Monotone. He tells Edwards to lie down, to be still. He presses the knife to his chest, forcing him into the bedroom. Edwards sees something on the floor, a blue 57-gallon drum. The smell coming from it is unbearable. Then, he notices the Polaroids on the dresser. Pictures of mutilated bodies. Dismembered limbs. Open torsos. And he realizes this is real. Dahmer sits beside him, rocking back and forth. He rests his head on Edwards' chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I'm going to eat your heart," he whispers. Edwards does not panic. He knows if he fights now, he will die. So he stays calm. He talks to Dahmer, tells him he is his friend, that he won't run. He waits for the right moment. And then he hits him. He punches Dahmer in the face, bolts for the door, tears through the apartment and down the street, running for his life. He flags down 2 police officers. Breathless, desperate, he shows them the handcuffs still attached to his wrist. "He tried to kill me," he says. "You have to come. Now." The officers follow him back to apartment 213. Dahmer opens the door, calm as ever. He smiles. He tells them it is all a misunderstanding. But when they step inside, the stench hits them. They look around. Then one of them notices the Polaroids. Dozens of them. Bodies in twisted positions. Torn flesh. Headless corpses posed on beds. The officer looks at Dahmer. These are real. Dahmer tries to run. The officers tackle him, wrestle him to the floor. He thrashes, fights, but it is over. As they cuff him, one officer opens the refrigerator. Inside, staring back at him, is a severed human head. The officer stumbles back, his face pale. He turns to his partner. "We've got a body here." He looks again. Then he realizes they have more than just a body. They have uncovered a nightmare. Within hours of Jeffrey Dahmer's arrest, apartment 213 transforms from a crime scene into a grotesque museum of death. Officers move through the cramped, foul-smelling space, uncovering horrors beyond comprehension. Everywhere they look, they find evidence of the 17 men and boys who never made it out. In the refrigerator, severed heads sit on shelves, wrapped in plastic like leftovers. The freezer contains a human heart and several strips of flesh, carefully packaged, as if meant for future meals. In the bedroom closet, detectives discover a collection of skulls, some painted, some bleached, some with the flesh still clinging to the bone. Beside the bed, a drawer filled with Polaroids, gruesome, detailed images of bodies in various states of dismemberment. Their limbs twisted unnaturally, their torsos sliced open, their organs removed. And then, in the corner of the room, they find the blue 57-gallon drum. It is filled with acid. Inside, 3 human torsos are dissolving. The liquid has turned a sickening shade of yellow-brown, the flesh breaking apart, disintegrating into a sludge. Investigators begin counting the remains, trying to piece together the victims. Some body parts belong to people they will never be able to identify. Others are missing entirely, consumed. The apartment is not just a crime scene. It is a slaughterhouse, a morgue, a tomb. The lead detective turns to Dahmer, who sits calmly in the living room, handcuffed. His face is blank, emotionless, as if he is waiting for someone to tell him what happens next. "Why did you do it?" the detective asks. Dahmer sighs. "Because I wanted to." There is no remorse. No panic. Only a quiet acceptance. Over the next several hours, Dahmer confesses everything. The killings, the necrophilia, the cannibalism, the experiments. He describes each murder in shocking detail. How he lured his victims, how he drugged them, how he strangled them, how he kept them. He admits to cooking and eating parts of his victims. He describes what human flesh tastes like, comparing it to beef, tender, slightly sweet. He tells detectives that consuming them made him feel like they were a part of him. "I didn't want them to leave," he says. "I wanted to keep them forever." As the world begins to hear of the atrocities committed in apartment 213, a wave of horror spreads through Milwaukee. People demand to know, how did this happen? How did a man with a criminal record, who had been arrested multiple times, who neighbors had repeatedly complained about, continue killing undetected for over a decade? The truth is chilling. Jeffrey Dahmer was caught and released time and time again. And in at least one case, the police literally handed a victim back to him. The world is about to learn just how close Dahmer was to being stopped. But no one listened. As the world absorbs the horrors of apartment 213, another revelation emerges. One so shocking, so unforgivable, that it ignites outrage across the country. Jeffrey Dahmer could have been stopped. A year before his arrest, on May 27, 1991, a boy escapes Dahmer's apartment. A 14-year-old boy named Konorak Synthesumphone. Naked, bleeding, disoriented. He stumbles into the street, barely conscious. He has been drugged. He has been drilled in the skull. And yet, somehow he gets away. Neighbors see him. They see his terrified eyes, the blood trickling down his legs. They call 911. When the police arrive, Konorak cannot speak clearly. His words are slurred, his body weak. He is fighting the drugs Dahmer gave him, fighting to stay awake. And then Dahmer appears. Calm, smiling, deceptively normal. He tells the officers it's just a misunderstanding. He tells them Konorak is his 19-year-old boyfriend, that he had too much to drink, that he just needs to sleep it off. The officers look at the boy, a child, naked, bleeding, shaking. They look at Dahmer, polite, articulate, white. They believe him, ignoring the desperate pleas of the neighbors, who are begging them not to let Dahmer take him back inside. The officers escort Konorak back into apartment 213. Back to Jeffrey Dahmer. They never check his ID. Never run a background check. Never search the apartment. If they had, they would have found a decomposing body in the bedroom. Instead, they leave, laughing, joking. One of the officers even reports to his dispatcher that they just dealt with a domestic lover's spat. The moment the door shuts, Konorak Synthesumphone is doomed. Dahmer strangles him. His body is found 2 months later. The officers who handed Konorak back to his killer? They are never charged. They are fired, but later reinstated. When the public hears this, the outrage is immediate. Protests erupt. People demand justice, not just for the 17 men and boys Dahmer killed, but for every moment the system failed to stop him. But it is too late. For Konorak. For all of them. And now, Jeffrey Dahmer must face his own judgment. By the time Jeffrey Dahmer steps into the courtroom in early 1992, the world knows his name. The details of his crimes are public. The photographs, the remains, the cannibalism, all of it. He does not deny what he did. In a chillingly calm voice, Dahmer pleads guilty but insane to 15 counts of murder. His lawyers argue that his mind was broken, that no sane man could commit such atrocities. But the jury disagrees. On February 17, 1992, Dahmer is found legally sane and guilty. His sentence, 16 life terms. A total of 957 years in prison. There is no chance of release. No parole. No escape. For the first time in his life, Dahmer is locked away. At Columbia Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, he seems indifferent to his fate. He spends his days reading the Bible, granting interviews, admitting to everything. He knows he deserves to die. And in November 1994, he gets his wish. Fellow inmate Christopher Scarver, a convicted murderer, takes justice into his own hands. One morning, while Dahmer is cleaning the prison bathrooms, Scarver follows him inside. Without warning, he grabs a metal bar and beats Dahmer to death. His skull is crushed. His face is unrecognizable. Jeffrey Dahmer dies at the age of 34. The families of his victims feel no sorrow. The world does not mourn him. But the questions remain. How many lives could have been saved? How many warnings were ignored? How many more monsters like him are out there, walking among us, unnoticed? Dahmer was not a genius, not an evil mastermind. He was simply a predator who knew how to hide in plain sight, and that should terrify us all. If you found this deep dive into Jeffrey Dahmer's horrifying crimes eye-opening, shocking, or informative, make sure to subscribe for more true crime stories. There are so many cases like this, monsters who were almost caught, victims who should have been saved. Don't miss the next one. Subscribe now.